Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I am Jill Carreiro, and I have recently joined the amazing team here at Orange Photonics as Vice President of Sales. I want to thank you for taking some time out of your afternoon to be with us here today. I also want to thank the other members of my team who are here with us to assist and certainly to answer any of your questions. If you do have questions as I'm presenting today's material, please feed them into the chat box and we'll make sure to address them either during the presentation, at the end, or in a follow-up email to you. If you don't know who we are, Orange Photonics is a New England-based technology company that's focused on robust, analytically superior science solutions. So we make a tool called LightLab. It is a portable HPLC-based solution for cannabis analysis. Today, I'll introduce you to the LightLab and how to use it. We'll talk about why this community, the law enforcement community, is so well served by LightLab LE. And then we're actually going to go through the step-by-step application of LightLab in a couple of pertinent case studies. So what is the orange box? LightLab is a portable, ruggedized HPLC, which is really no small feat in and of itself, because that photograph there kind of represents what HPLC normally look like. They are a scientific plumbing maintenance nightmare, to be quite honest. We have minimized and toughened it all up into an orange storm case. Much more important than its field readiness, though, is that we've also included a proprietary algorithm and workflow on board the tool, which essentially puts a $70,000 analytical chemist into the orange storm case as well. So what does it really do, though? Well, it measures cannabinoid potency. How strong is the cannabis sample that you have, and what THC and CBD cannabinoids are in that sample. So just a real quick refresher on the cannabis sativa plant. Hemp, well, hemp is cannabis that is CBD dominant. It's used in everything from inflammation cream to hair products. You probably have some in your house, or maybe your grandma does. There is very little to no THC in hemp. It's less than 0.3%, and it's been legal across the United States for quite a few years now. On the other side, though, you have adult use cannabis or marijuana, weed, pot. It's got lots of names. It's also got lots of THC in it, anywhere from 12% to 99% in modern day vape pens, for example. People have obviously used adult use cannabis for a very long time for recreational purposes because it makes you feel good, it causes euphoria, relieves pain. The difference being that it's only illegal in 11 states as of today, March 2021, and 31 states if it's medically prescribed by a doctor. But here's the thing, hemp and adult use cannabis, they smell the same and they look the same. They seem like the very same plant. So this is where LightLab comes in. How does LightLab work? Well, it combines two technologies in one. First, chromatography, and then spectroscopy. Chromatography separates the sample. It essentially is a way to stretch out the sample's chemistry, and it happens inside that little white column there. Essentially, your sample goes into the top there, and as solvent pushes it through, some of the cannabinoids inside there move through very, very quickly, like delta-9 THC, for example. Then other cannabinoids that are in the sample, they kind of have an affinity for the material that's in the column, so they move much more slowly and they come out later. The real key here is that every cannabinoid in the sample exits the column at a different time and then moves to the second stage of the analysis that's happening inside of the LightLab, which is spectroscopy. So as every cannabinoid comes out of the column, It moves to a multi-wavelength UV detector, which tells us the precise quantity of that cannabinoid as it passes through. It's a really, really amazing technology, actually, because any one of these common sample types can be tested. That's pretty awesome, actually, because it's not possible nearly as simply with a lab-based HPLC. It could be a dry plant, a wet plant, concentrates, oils, edibles, tinctures, and within 10 minutes, the most non-technical guy on your team can have very accurate results pretty much anywhere. It is important to note, though, it's not the magic pill, right? LightLab is so great at measuring everything about the cannabis plant. But what it isn't great at is measuring things that are outside factors like pesticides or additives or other drugs that might be on the cannabis plant. There are better technologies for that, and there are much uglier technologies. You can leave that for your EPA friends. So I don't really want to gloss over the science. I mean, as much as it's nerdville, I think there may be some closet nerds here. It's really important to, kind of help you understand how key this is. Because first and foremost, HPLC is the USDA reference method for cannabis analysis. So that's key. It's also what makes LightLab work so well. We have to keep in mind, again, some cannabinoids are legal and some are not. Without using HPLC to first kind of stretch out the sample, cannabinoids get measured in big blobs instead. So it's very, very, very difficult to separate the good CBD cannabinoids from each other, as well as separating from the bad THC cannabinoids and each other, without using a method like LightLab. And this is really why law enforcement needs it. It's the quantifiable determination of hemp versus adult use cannabis. It is all about the pot or not question. It is prosecutable evidence for the DA. It provides confidence in your warrant executions and situations like probable cause investigations. And really importantly, it helps to ensure propriety of seizures and arrests. And this final point is something that's very close to my heart, and it's really important to note because frankly, the legal landscape around cannabis is evolving at light speed. It is clearly incumbent upon law enforcement to adapt with every single change that comes down the pike. LightLab offers that kind of protection from the inevitable negative exposures that can happen. Unfortunately, it is part of the challenge of due diligence in modern policing. It seems we see these kind of stories all the time, but it really comes down to the inability to discern legal CBD from controlled THC cannabis products. There have been at least 20 of these stories over the past couple of years. There are a few that really stick out to me. That one in the middle there, this is an 80-year-old great grandmother that was arrested at Disneyland with her family because she had a CBD vape cartridge in her purse. And after a harrowing 12 hours, she was released. But you better believe that her family is not happy with Disneyland and it's not happy with the Orange County Sheriff Department. So, and it really, all it would have taken is a 10-minute test on the LightLab. So that really is important to consider because the regulations, they're endlessly changing. What will 2021 bring? Who knows? Who knows what the administration will do, right? But the question is, does your team have the resources it needs to essentially, minimize your exposure risk, right? It's the point of need testing that LightLab can provide helps you to avoid litigation, really allows your department the autonomy that you might really desire that you don't have now. And you can do it through a traceable lab science that's in an Orange Storm case that's been trusted for so many years. And really, it's important to note as well that teams are readily using this as presumptive technology now. We are definitely focused on creating precedents through some of these like lower level criminal cases, so we can get towards more broad court acceptance. But there's no doubt LightLab will pass, Daubert standards, Fry tests, depending on what your jurisdiction requires. And we are very much committed to working with you and your AGs, your DAs, to providing, expert witness testimony if you need it to back up this technology. We believe in it. So we have attendees joining us from all across the United States, frankly. Thank you so much again for being here. But we know that every single department and every region has a very unique perspective. And frankly is on kind of a different point in the cannabis legalization spectrum, if you will. So let's just talk about a couple of common use cases and discuss what they might mean to you, or you can consider what they might mean to you. First, it's that illicit unlicensed cultivation scene, right? That might be a 50-acre field. It might be an indoor grow or multiple indoor grows across many forfeited homes. But LightLab is going to be the solution to provide the quantitative evidence required to procure and serve a warrant, and to get the evidence right there at the spot, right? Because, I was talking to a Homeland Security agent just yesterday, and he said, very eloquent, he said, Jill, we don't have the luxury of detaining the whole field. And I thought, well, that's quite one way to think about it. And then perhaps maybe you're in a legal state, right? California, and you're much more concerned on protecting the legal operations in your area from organized crime elements, because we definitely know that these organized crime elements have taken advantage of hemp legality and the cover that it provides. Well, it's an on-the-spot solution for that too. When your transport control officers are out in the field, they can use LightLab to verify, C of A, certificates of analysis against huge truckloads of green biomass and prevent the illegal transport of goods across state lines. That's a really big deal right now. And then when it gets down to, through the chain and when it comes to people, retail applications, LightLab offers the ability to do spot checks, auditing of products sold to the public as hemp or as adult use, and that directly connects right over to, Department of Revenue. Because frankly, adult use cannabis can be taxed very, very heavily, especially in comparison to a hemp product. So it's a really interesting thing to consider. And then, of course, we have a number of really great relationships with State Department of Agriculture teams who rely very heavily on LightLab to confirm essentially regulatory compliance, right? To make sure that something or hemp bioproduct has less than 0.3% THC in it. And I've already learned a couple of really interesting stories of forfeiture cash outs because people are growing stuff that they're not supposed to. So there's a lot of things to consider here. I also want to touch on the forensic laboratories that are such a key part of the picture now. LightLab is very much a tool that can be used to supplement the low priority, super backlog inducing cannabis testing that is very likely to only increase. So it's important to consider all these use cases, but the bottom line is you can't tell hemp from cannabis, hemp from marijuana, hemp from adult use product without testing it with a product like without LightLab. Forgive me. And of course, this really is why teams like this is the Shelby County team there. They call it a game changer for the work that they do. Because it's solid data for solid prosecutions, but it's in your hands, right? When you need it. That is what it's all about. It's no, we want to eliminate the dependency that you have to have, the delay that is caused by sending things to the laboratory, and give you the ability to take action when you need it. It's already being very actively employed by over 25 law enforcement agencies across the United States because it's built on tried and true lab methodology for cannabis. It's got a locked-in workflow and onboard analysis that makes it so that your team follows the protocol and then they get the result. It's very locked in that way. It's great. The data is time-stamped, it's permanently stored, and it can be then wirelessly transmitted, essentially with a push of a button or via an SD card, all the quantitative results for the 12 most important cannabinoid profiles in there, and then the full chromatographic data if you need it, just like any state laboratory could provide. So you're not missing anything. You're actually just gaining a lot. And then for us, I noted it earlier, but LightLabs are made in New Hampshire, and that's where most of us are located. We are a US-based company. We have our finger very much on the pulse of this industry. And we're not a flash in the pan company. We are a third generation spectroscopy company. We make tools like this, and we make tools that we believe in, and we take support of those tools very, very seriously. It's very true to my heart and true to the entire team's heart. We want you to all be very successful with your application of LightLab. We offer complete user training in the field or virtually or some hybrid model for now, and provide the certificates you need of training. We have certificates of training on an annual basis if you need them as well. We put LightLabs through a really thorough in-house validation before you ever get the tool. And we provide annual recertification, calibration of the unit, and any paperwork that you need to go along with it. We have awesome user guides, online tutorials, support tools, and then really important to note, and something that we'll actually be expanding much more on in the future, is our ability to offer our law enforcement customers remote field support via an optional Wi-Fi reachback service. So it's really amazing how much we can do with this kind of technology from 1,000 miles away, but know that we are definitely here to support you and your department. So here's a quick snapshot of some of the groups across the United States and Canada who are currently using LightLab. It's everyone. It's everyone from sheriffs and police, highway patrol officers, Homeland Security, like I mentioned, Customs and Border Patrol, different groups from, wildlife agencies and state fish and wildlife groups. It's really a broad set, all based around the need, again, to do some quantitative determination of these two kind of cannabis products. Let's get into some details about LightLab 3 LE, which is our law enforcement version of LightLab. And it was just released late in 2020. So keep that in mind. That said, it's built on the same tried and true platform as our traditional standard LightLab, of which nearly 500 have been installed in the field now. But with LightLab LE, we've kept your teams in mind and tailored the on-screen instruction set even further, essentially to line up right with typical policing workflow and to make sample prep easier than ever, actually. So formal training, while we offer it, we definitely want you to take it. It's often deferred. There are two testing modes on the LE version. One is presumptive and one is quantitative mode. So let's dig into each of those just for a minute. First, presumptive mode, right? It's the easiest, fastest way to get that pot or not answer that we were talking about. It determines if a sample is high CBD or high THC. And it can do it accurately with samples that can be pretty challenging. Edibles like gummy bears, wet plant, things like that. While all the same chromatographic math is going on under the hood, it does it a little bit differently in that it uses ratios of the cannabinoids to essentially quickly determine whether you have a very high THC or a very high CBD sample, and provides a green light, red light kind of result right on screen here. So your team can confidently just move on to the next step, which very well may be, in fact, doing a full quantitative mode run. Now, this provides the lab grade quantitative results on 11 cannabinoids and terpene profiles. So it is traceable, reproducible, repeatable, and HPLC-like, right? You get the full chromatographic data buried in there, but what it provides is the percentage of each of 11 cannabinoids in the product. And it's important to note, you'll see here between the two screens, you always as well get that quick red, green light determination on whether or not the sample has a very high CBD ratio or high THC ratio. So for example, in this one, you see that red screen pop up, and certainly it says that the THC to CBD ratio is 6:1. So there's little doubt that that one's recreational. So now I've given you a quick rundown on LightLab LE. Let's walk through a couple of examples of how it gets used in the real world. And I'll share the basics of each case, but then I'll show you pictures of what's going on the screen. So scenario one, and there have been at least a half a dozen of these over the last year. A truckload of stinky green stuff is stopped on the highway, right? And highway patrol officer is provided a C of A by the truck driver, but it doesn't look legit, maybe something like that. One thing we know is that making an arrest or even delaying the driver too long very well may lead to bad press that nobody really needs. In this case, it's dried biomass, so we can use presumptive mode very quickly to figure out whether or not that sample is perfectly legal hemp, as he claims, or federally illegal adult use cannabis. So the officer takes the LightLab out, opens up the storm case. It's fully battery operated, runs independently for 8 hours. Screw on a couple of bottle lids, push a button, and you're good to go. System warms itself up and does a couple of self checks. And then this is what the screen looks like, okay? So the very first thing that your officer does is select the sample type from common forms. This is pretty easy. In this case, it's a plant. And then the next screen choice that comes up is whether or not the sample is a dried or a wet type sample. Here it's dried up for shipment, so we choose dried plant. Then we select presumptive mode to get that quick pot or not answer, right? We have a presumption here, and we're going to go forward with that. And up pops the sample prep instruction screen. So this is where we really take the guesswork out of it. It makes it very, very easy for your field user to do the analysis. So this is what they do. First, they'd grab a little bit of the plant and they'd stick it in the vial. They'd add a few vialfuls of the solvent. Then they put the sealed up vial on the shaker for 2 minutes. The LightLab actually times you if you want it to. But really, this is all about extraction. This is some chemistry happening here. The solvent extracts some of the cannabinoids from that material. You can't overdo it. Then the sample gets injected into LightLab. Again, we've set up tons of fail safes here, so you can't inject the wrong amount. The system is built to make it pretty much dummy proof. What you inject is way too much, more than what you need, frankly. And then that chromatographic separation and spectroscopy happens, and like I talked about earlier, and results, right? It's pretty easy. In this case, that green icon indicates that this is legal CBD, right? It's very clearly hemp, and the driver can move on down the road. Your officers can press that share button there, transmit the results to home base, and they can also move on down the road. This will work with concentrates like vape cartridges or waxes. This will also work with edibles like gummy bears, brownies, chocolate bars. This will also work with wet plant material. And this is something that's pretty unique because it's hard to measure plant material that's just been picked. So let's talk about a case that's just like that. And this is one that we do see pretty often, actually. It's that, maybe an unlicensed farm gets reported and then a local drug enforcement officer is on the scene. The DA is very clearly interested in the case. So we know, okay, we need some quantitative evidence here to get after this prosecution. And then further to that, organized crime is known. They are known to operate aggressively in the area, to protect their local grow activity. So leaving is not an option. Let's put it that way. Going through the workflow, again, we select plant, but in this case, because the plant is actually still growing, we select wet plant. We want the full quantitation of these samples this time, right? So we're going to choose quantitative mode, and I'm going to show you how that's a little bit different. Essentially, because we are being much more exact with the numbers, we have to do one extra step of sample prep when it comes to quantitative mode, and that's to actually weigh out the amount of sample that you put in the vial with the included scale with LightLab. So that's what we do first, and then we put it into the vial. We add the solvent. A little shaky action, and then injection, which, by the way, feels highly satisfying and mad sciencey, but that's just me. And then the sample is analyzed again over the course of about 8 minutes is what it takes, at which time, you know, your officers can be continuing their field investigation, asking questions, doing their work while the instrument does its work, and then reports the results. And this is what you'll see, right? The sample is definitely THC dominant cannabis. And depending on your jurisdiction, it's very, very likely to be illegal, in fact. The on-site officers can proceed with whatever due course of action is in place, right? But no matter what, there's no waiting on a lab. You've got the results you need. It's also very nice to see that you also have the easy red screen, green screen breakdown for your law enforcement officers, but a quick toggle will give you the full breakdown quantitatively of all of the cannabinoids in the sample. So, that is LightLab 3LE. That's who we are here at Orange Photonics. I hope you learned something today with me. LightLab 3LE is a simple to operate, rugged, and fully portable solution. It provides lab-grade accuracy for the presumptive and quantitative test of cannabis. It's a heck of a lot more convenient and economical than dealing with overburdened local forensic labs, frankly, and this makes your drug officers' jobs a whole lot easier. More than anything, though, what I really want to leave you with here today is that cannabis legality and regulations, they change every single day, every day. And what happens in the future, we don't really know. But what is clear is that LightLab is the only solution available on the market that truly serves the law enforcement community's ever-changing responsibility to uphold to those regulations. So we support you. We really look forward to continuing this conversation. I am hoping that you'll reach out to any of us at the information here, certainly, and we will address some of your questions now. Thank you again, everyone, very much. I'm Jill Carreiro.